Jochai Ben-Avie from Mozilla. I'm joined here by Denelle Dixon-Thayer, Mozilla's Chief Business and Legal Officer.
Hi.
So, debate about encryption has been raging lately. Mozilla, has been following this issue around the Apple and FBI case quite closely. What's the deal? What's going on? What is this issue?
It's not just about encryption. I think it's about security generally. I think that the way that we look at this is that the government is absolutely responsible for public safety, and that's a really important thing. But we as technology companies have a goal and an aspiration, and I would say a responsibility, to be respectful and responsible for user security. And so from my standpoint, while this discussion is about encryption on this device, it's also just about building the best security that we can for our users. So this is a lot of what's been going on as a result of the Apple case, but it's also just something that we think about every day in technology companies.
Seems like something users should really care about. We've heard a lot of sort of back and forth, between the government, between Apple, between different companies, including Mozilla weighing in. What's been going on over the last few days? How's this debate evolving?
So just with respect to Apple, the Apple case, the government filed its opposition and reply brief, last week, and laid out its position with respect to that. Apple today, we just received the reply brief that Apple filed today, probably a couple of hours ago, an hour and a half ago or so. So that's where we are with respect to this particular case. Oral argument is set up for next week on the 22nd, so this will be really interesting from that standpoint. The briefs themselves, I think, haven't really changed the discussion that we're having, which is the government's position is that this is just about one phone. What we know at Mozilla and what we know, I think, in the technology sector is that it's never just about one isolated instance. It's very hard to act in a vacuum. It's very hard to do something that isn't going to have ripple effects and repercussions. So I think that from our standpoint, that is still what we're dealing with. We can't actually, there's no safe or secure backdoor. And we believe that in this case, what the government is asking Apple to do is to create and to sort of eliminate all of the years of security work that they've done with respect to their operating system and to create a backdoor. And that's not something that we think, certainly not the authority that they're relying on with respect to the All Writs Act, which is very legalistic, but these briefs have turned very legalistic. But certainly not that authority gives them the right to require Apple to have its manpower undo years of security that they've put in place.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the All Writs Act. We've heard a lot about this. We've heard it's like a 200-year-old law or something. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is this law? Is it really relevant? Is it really applicable in this case?
So from my standpoint, I don't really care about the age of the law. I think that, gosh, if we were to focus on that, then the Constitution itself is very old and we couldn't rely on that. So for me, that's not really the point. The point is that the All Writs Act is residual authority for the court, and it allows the court to get technical assistance for areas that they might need it. Here, the All Writs Act is something that's very unique to use in this context, because it's actually, what they're trying to do is use it to do something really novel. And to say, hey, Apple, we want you to create an operating system that gets rid of all of the years of security work you've put in, and to do that using the All Writs Act, which is not really applicable. It's supposed to be very small, and in terms of the authority that you can derive from it, is a little bit, it's scary from the standpoint of what we can be required to do with respect to this kind of authority. Right now, the government, the legislative body, which is the body that is the one who's supposed to be writing these kinds of things and supposed to be doing that because they represent us, the people, right? Mm-hmm. We have a say when it comes to our legislators about what kinds of laws are put in place. And to use the All Writs Act, which is end running all the legislative and public discourse, is not the right thing from our standpoint to be able to do.
Do you think there is a relevant law that applies in this case?
So I think that there is, from my standpoint, and a lot of this gets into legalese in the briefs, but it's important. There's CALEA, which is a statute that was enacted by the government, by the legislative body, which requires telecommunications companies and others to be able to provide, if they've already put in place wiretap mechanisms or other mechanisms, they can't undo those. The government wants those to stay in play. The challenge here is that in CALEA, the government specifically excluded service providers like Apple. And so it's, we do think it's applicable. And when Congress has spoken, the All Writs Act is really not applicable to use. So very legalistic, but important from the standpoint of how the government is seeking to get the authority they want here.
Thanks, that's helpful. I think other people I've talked to have sort of said this is really actually a case about the First Amendment. How do you think that applies here?
Well, certainly from our standpoint at Mozilla, our code is open. You can audit it, you can look at it, you can determine what's in there. We believe that it's an expressive statement of the things that we care about, certainly from security measures or whatever things that we put in there. So code is First Amendment protected speech. And I think that even in this case, given what Apple has done, if you look at the versions, the older versions of iOS, back to 3, maybe 2, whatever, and you look at what they've done to today, which is they put a ton of security features in. That's code. I believe that's expressive. It's important from the standpoint of really discussing, using your code, what your positions are with respect to policy and whatnot. We at Mozilla certainly look at our code that way. I think that there might be some function, there might be some parts of code that's purely functional, but security measures that you put in place demonstrate how important you think that is from the company standpoint. And that's what Apple's done here. So I think the First Amendment is directly applicable. Why that's important is that you can't actually rely on another statute or another piece of government authority, from the court to infringe upon the First Amendment. That's our right to free speech, right? That's important that we keep that in play.
But there are people who say, if we don't provide access to this iPhone, aren't we essentially helping the terrorists? I mean, First Amendment's great and all, but this is a highly emotionally charged issue. It's an act of terrorism. How do you respond to that?
I think it's awful. I think it's really awful when we have to look at things like that happen out there, and then we have to make policy decisions or practical decisions as a result of it. It's no fun for anyone. Like, I don't think anybody involved in this case would say that they want to be doing anything to support the bad guys, right? But we can't look at things in isolation, and that's the most important thing. Every act causes a reaction. We know that, right? We know that just from our ordinary life. The same is true here. If you are just looking at something completely in isolation and you're trying to just take care of this one iPhone, it doesn't work that way. You create this code, you in-run those security measures. Not only are you doing things with respect to the First Amendment and with respect to Apple's own policies that are challenging, but you're creating a backdoor. And as I said, there's no secure backdoor. More importantly, let's not talk about Apple. Let's talk about all of the rest of the companies out there that have expressed their intentions with respect to security in their code, and they've done their best to do their part for public safety, which is to create the best security. And so it's not about Apple, right? It's not about this phone. It's about all of the companies and many, many governments out there that could be asking us to do the same thing. So it's awful to start from there and to think about that, and nobody likes that these things happen, and we all want to do our part. Our part here is to create the best security so the bad guys don't get to be able to access the data for the users.
So thanks, I think that helps a lot. What you mentioned that they're going to be back in court on Tuesday. Sort of what can we expect to happen from here? What are sort of the next couple steps for this process in this case?
So I suspect no matter who wins, so they'll have the oral argument. A lot of times the judges have made at least a preliminary assessment in their mind as to how the case should play out even before oral argument. Oral argument is supposed to be the opportunity for you to tell the judge things new or things that are particularly important for you. So that'll happen on the 22nd. And then the judge will either decide that day, which I think is probably unlikely, or we'll get a ruling on that pretty quickly thereafter. I believe that no matter who wins at that level, there's going to be an appeal to what's called the Ninth Circuit, which is the appellate court that sits above this district court. And then we'll have another round of briefs. We'll have likely another oral argument. And then again, from there, we could see another appeal to the Supreme Court. So I think it's really interesting from the standpoint of just the legal tactics. So from my standpoint, like, legal tactics here are really interesting. but also just the policy implications. I think are fascinating and I love what I think has been so awesome is that this is really mainstream, and the discussion about encryption and about security has been brought to a different level. So this case has actually made it so that we're talking now, which is what we want to happen. And we don't just want talking to happen at the legislative bodies. We want it to be the users, just average people like me who I want to have those conversations and think about it. We just had last week some 7th graders here, and we were talking to them about lots of different security issues, and encryption came up. And one of the interesting points is they thought that encryption was a bad thing because it's used in spy movies and novels, and so really being able to educate the public about the value to encryption and that you use it every day on the internet. And in order to protect this awesome public resource that we have, we need to have these measures in place so people feel comfortable using them. The government wants this, they ask us to do this, we all want this. So I think that not only will we see this legal positioning happen, we'll also see this continued public discourse, which is beneficial to all of us.
And how is Mozilla sort of engaging in this debate, particularly around this sort of public conversation and discussing this with the public and getting that awareness up?
So it was really interesting and completely not planned, but we actually started an encryption campaign from our standpoint, which is an education campaign, on the same day that the government filed was able to get its order from the court. And so we were already engaging. This was already a crucially important issue for us. So we've been doing our encryption. We've had a couple videos that have gone out really trying to help the public understand what encryption is. And then of course this case came up, which again provides us an awesome opportunity to see it in play. So we of course filed an amicus brief. We think that this is really important. We want to keep the discussion going at the legislative body, at the administrative level, meaning at the government's level, the Obama administration. We want those conversations to continue. So we're engaged at all levels, from our users to the legislative bodies to the administrative bodies, and of course with respect to this case as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Denelle. I want to make sure that the folks watching at home have a chance to ask any questions. All right, we'll see if something comes in, but is there anything else that we missed or anything else you think it's important for folks to know?
I think I would encourage everybody to look at our the campaign, the encryption campaign that we have. Take a look at our videos. Certainly, I want everybody to learn as much about this issue as you can, and not just the Apple issue, but just about the issue about security. I would love it if all of us really compelled all of the technology services that we use to really focus on security. I think it only benefits the users, it benefits the government's position. As I said, they want this too, and it really helps us to create and to build on this public asset that we have. So
Wonderful. Thank you.